Chapter 7: How to Bite the Big One, Bodysurfing. When my family moved to our small island from Southern California, aside from trading in the Mojave Desert for the Lowcountry and Atlantic Ocean, the biggest change I experienced was that I suddenly became crazy about bodysurfing. More than anything, flopping around in the surf like a madman made me feel carefree again in the midst of a midlife crisis that had me inclined to second-guess my life's work. I couldn't seem to overcome the sense that I'd done nothing truly worthwhile with my time on this planet. That the books I'd written and the art I'd made, despite garnering much praise and success, just weren't up to my insanely perfectionistic standards. I kept thinking I'd watered down my talent, trying to be a nonfiction writer, a novelist, and a visual artist all at once. Jack of all trades, master of none seemed to apply all too well to me. I wished I'd burned certain paintings I actually posted online. I wished I'd hired a professional editor for my self-published books. I wished I'd never taken on any number of nonfiction subjects for which, in retrospect, I felt painfully, imminently unqualified. When asked in his old age to explain certain aspects of his early novels, William Faulkner reportedly replied to the effect that he no longer understood the books he'd written in his youth. As I approached the half-century mark myself, I was just beginning to understand that Faulkner might not have been joking. Occasionally, I encounter things in my own writing I don't recall having penned, things that strike me as utterly foreign, as if written by a stranger. Sometimes a whole sentence or passage comes across this way. Other times, a single mysterious word leaves me wondering where it might have come from and what it could possibly mean. Whenever I went bodysurfing, all such absurd and self-defeating thoughts simply evaporated. I was as joyfully present as I'd ever been doing anything, anywhere. Hours of bodysurfing passed in what felt like minutes. I could go at it all day, pausing merely to eat a sandwich while standing knee-deep in the foaming surf. Clearly, I was in my dharma. This blissful state lasted a little over 2 months. My family showed up on the island in August, thinking we were merely taking a much-needed vacation. We never left. One afternoon toward the end of October, when the waves at the height of hurricane season turned surprisingly big and powerful, I got put in the spin cycle and shredded the MCL along with some cartilage in my left knee. As icing on the cake, I also banged my head on the seabed and nearly went unconscious at a time of year when the island's entire platoon of seasonal lifeguards were all back at college getting drunk and having sex parties instead of saving lives. Happily, the beaches here are forgivingly sandy. Had I been atop a reef or rocky patch, I could have died instantly or lost consciousness and drowned. As it was, head still spinning, I hobbled up out of the water knowing I'd screwed myself up good, only to undergo 6 months of rehab before so much as sticking a toe back in the ocean. There are numerous ways, not even related to riding waves, to check out or at least get seriously injured while body surfing. Getting caught in a rip current and drowning is probably the most common. Even if people know intellectually they should stop fighting the rip and conserve their strength by swimming sideways as the current loops back toward the beach, all too often instinct takes over. They exhaust themselves resisting, and they're dead before they know it. Some people have the misfortune to get mowed down by fast-moving boats, catamarans, or wave runners. That's never much fun and usually deadly. Shark attacks, though rare, are a perennial threat. All the jumping and kicking involved in body surfing is enough to make the already curious men in gray suits even curiouser. I've been circled by 5-foot blacktips while catching waves. Not long ago, a massive great white was caught and tagged off these shores, so sure, you could be eaten. Poisonous jellyfish have been known to kill surfers on rare occasions. 2 of the most venomous varieties are the sea wasp and box jellyfish, neither of which, I'm happy to say, is normally found in these waters. Death by Portuguese man-of-war, while also extremely rare, is another possibility. This pseudo-jellyfish, which actually isn't a single organism, but a collection of small polyps, has bright blue tentacles that can reach through the water over 100 feet and deliver a sting potent enough to kill a large fish or even a human. The tentacles are suspended from something that, to my eye, resembles a clear plastic empanada with its crimped edge facing skyward. This is the sail the creature uses, like that of an old-timey warship, to navigate the high seas. So the next time you glimpse what looks like lunch from a Mexican street vendor being windblown toward you on the waves, swim the hell out of there. Fast. And please, don't pick up anything matching this description that has washed up on the sand. A man-o-war can sting you even when apparently dead. I once encountered a teenage girl on the beach after a big storm who had just been stung by one she'd picked up without knowing better. I took one look at the situation and advised her to seek medical attention immediately. The creepiest aspect of Portuguese man-o-wars is that not only can they hurt you when dead, they can sting you even when dismembered. Detached, venomous tentacles can float around like severed zombie hands for days, just waiting to sting the crap out of unsuspecting victims. I'm convinced this happened to me once. But since I never saw a man-o-war in the water that morning, I didn't realize until much later that the telltale whip-like wounds wrapped around my ankle that burned and ached for weeks probably came from one. Getting punctured by poisonous stonefish spines is another way to go belly-up body surfing. Stonefish are among the deadliest fish in the sea. Even in clear water, they're almost impossible to spot with their rocky camouflage that gave rise to their name. Stepping on one is truly life-threatening. Lucky for me, stonefish are only found in Indo-Pacific regions far from my small island. Unluckily, we have almost as many stingrays as we do tourists overcrowding these shores, and they're nearly as much of a nuisance. Stingray injuries, on the rise locally in recent years, eerily in tandem with the increase in tourists of late, are as common here as ambulance sirens. Stingrays cover themselves with sand while waiting to ambush their prey and are as hard to spot as stonefish. And as with stonefish, they usually sting people, clueless tourists mostly, in the foot. More often than not, this happens when somebody on mental vacation goes loping out through the shallow surf like a complete moron, a sight that always makes me cringe, and steps on a ray, which instinctively defends itself by lashing out at the offending foot with its barbed tail, injecting painful venom into the victim's system. Treatment involves applying heat to the affected area until the venom runs its course. It's not unusual for a barb to break off inside the victim's flesh, often requiring surgery to remove the fragments. Nasty bacterial and fungal overgrowths from stings are also widely reported. Stingray stings are plenty painful but rarely fatal. That said, if you know the story of Australian zookeeper Steve Irwin, the intrepid crocodile hunter who achieved worldwide fame around the turn of the millennium, you know that stingrays can kill you. While snorkeling in chest-deep water filming a documentary series called, I'm not making this up, Ocean's Deadliest, Irwin happened on a ray with a wingspan of just under 7 feet. Tragically, and for no obvious reason, the ray went totally Norman Bates and proceeded to stab Irwin repeatedly as he tried to video it swimming away. Irwin's heart was punctured, and he bled out before he made it to a hospital. This story is particularly relevant to body surfers. We often cruise along on shallow waves with our vital organs exposed to any ray that might feel inclined to take a jab at us. When wading in the ocean, you can and should do the stingray shuffle to frighten rays out from under your feet, but there's really nothing you can do when you're not even touching bottom. Stingrays are definitely a preoccupational hazard of mine. I comfort myself with the thought that out of the tens of thousands of waves I've caught, I've never been stung. It seems the odds of being fatally injured by a ray in the act of body surfing are comparable to those of being struck by lightning. Which is another way, theoretically speaking, to bite the bullet riding waves. The best days for body surfing are often stormy, as the surf tends to kick up in inclement weather. The only problem is that the lifeguards here, like good little fascists protecting the image of the corporate entity known as the municipality, kick everybody out of the water at the mere sound of distant thunder. I've often wondered if this is actually legal, or if, as with so much else in post-9/11 American life, this is merely another example of our freedoms being unconstitutionally stripped away one by one. I mean, if I choose to risk my life catching waves in a thunderstorm, that's my frigging business, right? I'm a nonviolent guy, But the next time some brainwashed Duracell trapped in the Matrix tells you that by curtailing our liberties, the authorities are just trying to protect us, please do yourself and freedom a favor by sucker punching them in their lying jaw. In the off-season, as mentioned, there are no lifeguards. But in the high season, the only way to get around the island's draconian restrictions in a thunderstorm is to body surf when the lifeguards are off duty, either at daybreak or after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm not, nor will I ever be, an up-and-atom exerciser. Constitutionally, I'm just not cut out to be a member of the Dawn Patrol. This means that my only chance to catch really sick waves in a summer squall was to head out in the early evening. Back in July, I was joined by Lee, an avid bodyboarder herself, for some righteous surf in a classic summer thunderstorm. Our son was upstate staying with his grandparents for the week. As temporary empty nesters, Lee and I both felt a little more daredevilish than usual. To be clear, we never actually saw lightning. If we had, we would have hightailed it out of there. But thunderclouds circled us for 2 hours as rain beat down intermittently in deafening, nearly blinding sheets. For all the turbulence in the skies, whenever the rain let up, the waves were as clean and smooth as sand dunes at night, which they sort of resembled as they approached in shades of gray like moving mountains. They seemed absolutely alive and full of personality, especially when the downpour picked up and pockmarked the water's surface with millions of tiny explosions. I was reminded of a short poem I wrote several years ago. Water has a mind not to mess, but to fool around with. Water is more like life than solid things, and more like death too. Waves that can crush are equally meant to be ridden. That evening was the highlight of my summer. Stoked, Lee and I caught perfect wave after perfect wave, riding them so far and long that the only other people insane enough to be out on the ocean in those conditions, a group of drunk Scandinavian tourists, kept cheering us on and giving us thumbs up. There's one more way to die, or be injured body surfing, that comes to mind, and it does so because it happened to me earlier in the summer. One sunny afternoon, just after the solstice, I was body surfing by myself when something strange began to happen. Every so often when I went underwater, I heard the sound of birds singing. I didn't know what to make of it. Since it kept happening, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Just as I was about to call it quits and head for dry land and maybe a psychiatrist, something about the size of a German shepherd swam into my knees so forcefully it knocked me flat on the sand. I was shaken up, but fortunately uninjured. Freaked out, I caught the next wave and rode it all the way onto the beach. At first, I assumed I'd been run over by a shark, but when I got back home, on a whim, I did a Google search for dolphin underwater noises. I found a YouTube video and hit play. Wouldn't you know it, dolphins can sound just like birds.